With me today is my friend Kate Drew. She is Director of Research at CCG Catalyst Consulting Group. And we always have great conversations on the industry, what's happening in banking and fintech. She's definitely one of the people I go to really get in the know of what's happening at the moment. So welcome, Kate. Very happy to have you on.
I'm really happy to be here. I feel like we've had so many of these chats offline. It will be fun to do one a little bit more formally, right?
No, I'm excited. We love your research reports that we get via email all the time. Everybody here at Trevelyan just has signed up for your newsletter and your reports, and we see you on LinkedIn. Just great information on what's happening in banking and fintech at the moment. And we talked about what subject to talk about today because there's so much. And I think it's a very relevant time to talk about BaaS, banking as a service. I'm seeing articles galore. I'm seeing LinkedIn posts, everything, the title, BaaS Gold Rush to the explosion of BaaS. I think it's great. We have quite a few BaaS clients, very well-known BaaS clients. So I think it's a very relevant topic for right now. So to start off with, what are you seeing on your end, since you're in the data, talking with a lot of people, as your job, what are you seeing as some of the trends right now in 2022 with BaaS?
So I think there's really two parts to this. I think the first is that BaaS, or banking as a service, is really moving fully into the mainstream now, right? It's been percolating for a while. It's definitely been a buzzword for a while, but I think in the last year, it's really become, a term or a concept that most people in the industry are at least familiar with, and many are interested in. And so we're starting to see, more interest from institutions or from banks that want to get involved with BaaS. And I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Because if we go back to what banking as a service is, right, it's really the ability for a bank to deploy its products and services through a non-bank third party, right, who manages that front-end customer experience. So you're outsourcing the customer experience and also customer acquisition. And those are two things that are really difficult to do right now. So it makes a lot of sense that we're starting to see a lot more interest from the bank side. We're actually going to publish in the spring our U.S. banking study for this year. We do it every year. We survey C-level bank executives in the United States. And one of the things we asked about this year was banking as a service. And there was just a tremendous amount of interest. A majority of institutions are at least somewhat interested now in getting into the banking as a service space. And I think the second piece of that is that the barriers to doing so are starting to come down from a technology standpoint. I think, we're starting to see more banking as a service infrastructure providers like Synctera, Treasury Prime, really come in and say, okay, this can seem like a gargantuan undertaking from a technology standpoint to put a bank and a fintech together in this way, all of the communication that needs to happen in the middle, all of the infrastructure, and they are abstracting that complexity. So on one hand, you have all of this interest, which makes a ton of sense. And then you have these facilitators that are coming in to actually make it happen. And I think that's why we're starting to see sort of the explosion of this trend, is because it's one thing to have the interest, it's another thing to actually be able to do it.
Yeah, like I have an interest of playing in the NBA, but doesn't mean I can do it.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
So Synctera, we had Peter Hazelhurst on Trevelyan Next a couple months ago. Treasury Prime, I know a few of the people out there, so they're really helping with the technology side, kind of matchmaking the fintechs. But there's still a lack of, and I know Eric Sprink, our friend at Coastal, says there's still so many fintechs out there that he's inviting more BaaS banks to come in. He hopes more BaaS banks come in. It'll be good for the industry, but also Coastal has a pipeline where they just can't handle all these fintechs that are coming to them. So there needs to be more competition out there, I should say, but just, more options maybe for fintechs is the best word to use.
Yeah, and there's so many different kinds of fintechs too, right? I think a lot of times when we talk about banking as a service, we immediately go to a Chime or a Current or an Aspiration, these sort of really big neobank players. But there are all different kinds of propositions out there that fintechs are bringing to market. And the room to run on that end is still tremendous, right? So why wouldn't it be on the bank side as well? I do think, though, having a really clear strategy of what you're looking for and what you want to go after is important, because there are so many different flavors of BaaS, right? What kind of products are you going to offer? What kind of fintechs do you want to go after? Are you looking to do something more specialized, or are you looking to do something more high volume, right?
Yeah.
These are all really important questions. It's not as simple as just, I want to do banking as a service.
Yep. Like you said, everybody, you can just sit in a room and say, I want to do it, but what's your strategy? Talent, as we always talk about, and Trevelyan loves to talk about, obviously, is always a big aspect of that. And the talent on the bank side is evolving. We're seeing more interest from our BaaS clients for risk and compliance type roles. But I'm also I read an article a couple days ago, it's Gonzo Banker, that there's going to be more engineering tech roles. So you're going to need those API experts and UX and all those different names for engineers on the bank side to be able to work with the engineers on the fintech side. Do you see that in the future? More product managers, engineers moving into community banks to handle this volume?
I think that's a tough one, right? Because I think community banks, from a mindset perspective, and you probably see this all the time, bringing in that kind of talent is really difficult, because that talent is competitive, and also they're not used to it, right? But I do think, I agree that there's definitely value in having people who can speak the same language as the people that you're working with. Yep. And you can have, an infrastructure provider in the middle that's abstracting a lot of that complexity, right? But if you don't have people that are speaking the same language as everybody you're working with, you're ultimately going to struggle to have a really good grasp of what's going on. And that's really important, right? When you're talking about risk and you're talking about already a proposition that, requires quite a lot of oversight.
Yeah. Now, how do you go beyond just being kind of a rent-a-charter, becoming a true partner? How do you align yourself with the fintech and become a true strategic partner? Are there ways to do that? What are your thoughts there?
I really love this question, because I spend a lot of time thinking about what is next for banking as a service, right? I mean, we talk about how, there's a lot of room for more banks and all of that. And I do think that that's true, but I also think that the space is not uncompetitive, right? Like I've spoken to banking as a service providers who don't want to work with banks that haven't done at least one program before. Yeah. So there is definitely, we're going to come to a point, right, where you need to differentiate in some way. And I think, ways to go beyond the charter, right, is going to be a really important component of that. Are you going to, provide technology? Are you going to embed different capabilities, maybe data analytics or underwriting capabilities? Are you going to partner with others and bundle those solutions together and take them to market? And a lot of that has to do with what you're specializing in. Are you specializing in business banking? Are you specializing in consumer banking? But I think there are a lot of opportunities there. And as we start to talk about, big bank interest in banking as a service, that becomes super relevant, right? Because I think we often focus on the community bank aspect, and that's because, typically interchange is how everybody in banking as a service is making money today. and banks with, sub 10 billion in assets are exempt from caps on interchange. So for bigger banks, it hasn't been, a huge area. But in the future, especially on the business banking front, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. And the value there is going to come from more than the charter. Like if you look at what Goldman is doing with Stripe Treasury, right? That's not about rent a charter, right? That's about how can we power the Stripe ecosystem and all of the businesses that they connect to. So I think, and obviously it's Goldman technology powering that too. I can tell you, I don't know exactly what the economics are of that arrangement, but I'd be willing to bet it's not interchange.
Yeah, and how about SoFi? I mean, I saw that I posted last week, and they now have a charter with the purchase of that small bank out in California. They purchased Galileo, I think, right? Is that the name last year? And now I forget the name. It's
Technisys.
Yeah. So what do you think they're building there? Kind of an end-to-end solution for banking as a service and other avenues of technology?
I mean, I love this, right? Because it's the full stack, right? Like if you break down what banking as a service is, right now it's the bank, and that's the regulatory framework, the compliance expertise, all of that. It's the infrastructure provider in the middle, processor, all of that. And then it's the fintech on the other side. So what SoFi has essentially done is bring all of that in-house. It's now in a position to offer the charter, offer the technology, offer the processing. You can come to SoFi. I mean, they haven't done this yet, right? But you, in the future, may be able to come to SoFi and get it all in one place. Yeah,
I think Green Dot might be, similar in that aspect. They're banking as a service charter. So that, like you said, it's got to go beyond, especially when you get more players in the BaaS market. It's got to go beyond, because if you're a fintech, wouldn't you trust a Coastal Community or Lincoln Savings over somebody who's, looking to partner with their first fintech? I would, if I had, my whole blood and sweat tied up in this. I'd want to work with somebody who has experience, knows how to speak the language, has the technology, has got, a huge aspiration or chime up and going. So for the new players coming in, it's not just gonna be like, oh, we're gonna turn on the switch and we're just gonna have these fintechs flocking to us. I think you really need to go beyond that. You gotta show them that you're a true partner, you understand how to get, because you're in it together. You have the money flowing through the fintech, it's sitting with the bank, the risk and compliance, has to be a true partnership. It can't just be rent a charter, in my opinion, for it to be very successful.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I would agree with that completely. And I would say also, as you think about how those partnerships grow, right, you want to have a portfolio of fintechs that make sense for your bank and for your core strengths, right? So that you, as you continue, like we talked about, to build out additional capabilities and functionality, that it makes sense for your portfolio of clients. So I think the strategy and, obviously the way you see it from a talent perspective is really, really important to underpin how a bank jumps in here. Because I hear a lot, I think you do too, we got to get into BaaS, we got to do this, and you have to almost say, take a step back, right? Why do you want to do this? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah. Are you trying to diversify income? Are you trying to make up for maybe lost income from overdraft fees or something else being eliminated? Or do you just want to survive because you see everything going in this direction? Or is it, what do the kids call it, FOMO? Is it like fear of missing out? You see all these banks being valued at higher stock valuations, but it's tough. Like these original banks, if you talk about Radius, which was purchased by Lending Club, Coastal, MBB, Lincoln Savings Bank, another client of ours, they've been in this arena for 7, 8 years now, 5 to 7 years, maybe a little bit longer. So it's like they have they went through those kind of growing pains and they understand. So I feel like they have such an advantage going forward, especially if they bring in the right technology and right talent, because they don't have to go out and sell really. You know, the people we talk to at those banks, they have a pipeline that they can't handle. There's every week there's fintechs coming to them, calling them.
Yeah.
So they get to pick and choose who they want to partner with. So that's the advantage of kind of being first to market and building it up. Not saying it's impossible, but it's tough. And I think with the technology it helps, but also it's a culture thing, as we always talk about. You can't just dip your toe in. You have to dive in, head first, and just not say it might not go well over the first 6 months to a year, but you got to stick with it. But no, that's fantastic. I wanted to bring up one more thing. So I read this quote in Financial Brand, and again, it's from Eric Sprink at Coastal. That guy probably has a press agent. I feel like he's everywhere. One of our favorite clients. He says, and this is a quote, "You're going to have more brands get into financial services, and one way to do it is to partner with banks. Fintechs were the first big wave, but I think the next wave will be different. It will be companies with large, loyal followings that want to sell financial products to their customers." That's interesting to me because you have the fintechs getting in it, but now maybe you see a Nike, or you're seeing Walmart with the purchase of One through their fintech. Do you think you're going to see more of these large brands, loyal followers, starting to partner with banks to offer services directly to their consumers?
I would say absolutely. Yeah. And I would say we're already seeing that, right?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't necessarily call, I think the Shopify Balance product is a really good example of that. That's a financial services company, but I wouldn't necessarily, they're not a neobank, right?
Yeah.
And they are, partnering with Stripe and then with Goldman to offer financial products to their merchants directly. Right. So I think we're already starting to see the beginnings of that. And I think, when you start thinking about retail, like Nike, you mentioned, Sephora comes to mind. I think these are companies that have a tremendous amount of opportunity to embed financial products. That could be buy now, pay later. It could be various forms of prepaid that rewards cards that you top up and then can spend off of, mobile wallets. I think there's definitely a ton of opportunity there. And I know that some of the banking as a service providers really, like Bond, for example, really focus on those types of companies as well. So I think not only, is that something we're going to see, it's something that's definitely already happening.
Yeah. And I feel like definitely the small business, community banks, that's where I would be most fearful if I was maybe a traditional community bank, maybe these tech forward fintechs or companies kind of chipping away at small business loans. You can offer end-to-end kind of point of service like Square, to the end to give them analytics and all this other stuff. I feel like that's just starting to happen, and it feels like there's more and more. You're seeing more of it with fintechs focused on small business. Do you think that's true? It feels like it started with consumer over the past few years with Chime and Current, Stash, and Dave, but now you're moving more into the small business arena.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that arena is that it's not just, so you could take a player like Square, for example, right? And they are integrating regulated financial products into their platform. But then they also are integrating non-financial products at all. You can do email marketing from Square. You can do all of these things. So how do you start to think about not just embedded finance, but embedded value-added services, right? And then as a bank, and this is kind of taking us into a different conversation, right? But it is worth touching on that, as a bank, it's not just about deploying your products through other channels. It's about what can you also integrate back into your pipeline and expose to customers, because those that are sitting at the center of this are doing both.
Yeah. No. And like you said, that's part two. Well, later in the year, we'll go down rabbit hole. But no, this is great, Kate. I know I love talking to you. You have great ideas, and your research is fantastic. So this is fantastic, and it's a very exciting time. We see it on our end with our clients, our BaaS clients. They're very excited. They're bringing on new talent. They're bringing on new presidents of fintech, and they're excited because they see the growth possibility without losing. And this is essential. Without losing that community bank culture, or the community bank that does have branches, and they're just adding. They have more revenue. They see they need to diversify their revenue streams and add more products for their customers to use. So you can do that while helping innovators and fintechs at the same time and get a piece of that revenue. It just feels like great synergy between two fantastic groups: the innovators, the fintechs, and banks kind of coming together to provide these products to consumers. Yeah,
and I mean the community banks, they're still doing community banking. It's just now they have the ability to reach communities that are distributed. They're not just bound by geography.
Exactly.
And I think that is really, really cool to see. And I think the evolution of that over time is going to be something to watch for sure.
Yeah, and part 2 will include, we can't go down the metaverse rabbit hole right now. We can talk about
metaverse
that
communities, right?
Yeah, metaverse communities where you can just sit in your chair in Iowa and suddenly be in Hawaii. But that's on part 2 also, because that fascinates me. Blockchain technology coming fascinates me. AI, of course, how that's going to change things. But that will be another date, because I think our audience, this isn't Joe Rogan. We're not going to go on for 3 hours here. But no, thank you, Kate. Really appreciate your time. And like I said, we'll catch up for another one of these maybe in the fall, and we'll see kind of where the market is. It's changing so quickly right now. We could be talking about a whole other technology by then. So have a wonderful March, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Thanks, Kate.